In 1890, Paris was the heartbeat of the Belle Époque, a city where art, poetry, and music collided in smoky cafes and candlelit salons. Claude Debussy was 28, a young composer with talent that unsettled the old guard and dreams too large for the rigid forms taught at the Conservatoire. He had already seen his share of scandal, fierce critics, financial troubles, and a reputation for breaking rules, both musical and personal. But in the narrow streets of Montmartre, he found a different kind of inspiration. Poets reading by lamplight, painters capturing fleeting colors, a city that seemed alive with moments too delicate to trap on canvas or page. Debussy wanted to capture those moments in sound, not grand symphonies, but fragments of light and shadow, music that shimmered like moonlight on water. And in that year, a small, quiet idea began to take shape at his piano, a melody so fragile it would take him 15 years to let the world hear it, a piece that would become one of the most beloved in history, Clair de Lune. Before Clair de Lune was music, it was a poem. In 1869, the French symbolist Paul Verlaine published a collection called Fête Galante. Among its verses was Clair de Lune, a quiet, wistful reflection on moonlight, moonlit masquerades, and the subtle sadness that lingers when the night grows still. Debussy adored poetry. His notebooks were filled with fragments of verse, and Verlaine was among his favorites. The poet's images of pale light, veiled faces, and gentle longing spoke to something in Debussy's own heart. When he began sketching what would later become Clair de Lune, he borrowed the poem's title, not to set it to music directly, but to capture its atmosphere, its world. Verlaine's lines speak of music that is almost inaudible, drifting through the air like a memory. Debussy's notes seem to answer, as if in another language. For Debussy, moonlight wasn't just something you could see. It was something you could feel. By 1890, Debussy's personal life was as restless as his music. He was living in Paris but never felt at home in its polite society. His sharp opinions and refusal to conform had earned him both admirers and enemies. Money was always scarce. Debussy had talent, but not the kind that guaranteed steady income. He taught piano lessons, played accompaniments, and took on whatever work he could find, always chasing enough to survive while still carving out time to compose. And then there were the affairs. His love life was complicated, marked by passion and scandal. Debussy was drawn to strong, independent women, often writers, artists, or singers, and his relationships were as intense as they were unstable. In this period of uncertainty, Clair de Lune was not born from comfort. It came from longing, from a man searching for beauty in the midst of chaos. While Paris bustled outside, Debussy's apartment was quiet except for the sound of a piano, a few notes, a pause, and then another, like moonlight finding its way through the cracks of a closed window. The melody began as a whisper in 1890. Debussy was 28 and sketching a small piano suite called Suite Bergamasque. Originally, he called one piece Promenade Sentimentale. It was personal, poetic, not yet transformed into the Clair de Lune the world would later know. For 15 years, that whisper lived in drawers and notebooks. Debussy hesitated. He felt the early music lacked the maturity he craved. Then, around 1905, publishers approached him. His reputation had grown since works like Prélude à l'après-midi d'un faune, and they urged him to publish the suite. Only then did Debussy revise the pieces, refine titles, rework textures, and finally release the set. The third movement was renamed from Promenade Sentimentale to Clair de Lune, inspired by Verlaine's poem. Another movement, originally called Pavan, was retitled Paspied, a change in both name and dance character. The result? A suite begun in youth, polished in adulthood, now etched forever in music history. When Clair de Lune finally emerged from Debussy's drawer, it didn't sound like the Paris of 1905. It sounded like something from another world. This was not music to show off at a glittering salon. It was too fragile for that. Clair de Lune felt private, like a confession whispered to no one in particular. Where other composers wrote to impress, Debussy seemed to write to remember. His notes drifted, unrushed, as if they were following a memory he didn't want to lose. It's Moonlight not as a scene, but as a feeling. The pale calm after heartbreak, or the soft glow of something you know can't last. Maybe that's why it has endured. It's not tied to the fashions of its time. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It just waits, quietly, for anyone willing to listen. In Debussy's time, music had rules. Harmony moved in expected ways. Forms were predictable. Composers were trained to respect tradition. Debussy didn't care. To him, music wasn't a set of instructions. It was a language for things words couldn't hold. He hated the stiffness of academic composition. He wanted music that moved like light, like water, like thought itself. Clair de Lune was his quiet rebellion. No thunderous statements, no grandiose finales. Instead, it broke the rules in silence, slipping between harmonies, letting phrases dissolve instead of resolving. It was intimate in a way that formal music rarely dared to be. The critics didn't quite know what to do with that. It didn't fit neatly into any category. But Debussy wasn't writing for categories. He was writing for those moments in life when beauty feels almost unbearable, and you can't explain why. When Suite Bergamasque was published in 1905, there was no grand premiere for Clair de Lune, no opera house fanfare, no orchestral debut. It simply appeared in print, softly among its fellow movements. Its first listeners encountered it almost by chance. Critics initially paid little attention. It was the orchestral poems like Prélude à l'après-midi d'un faune or La Mer that made waves. Clair de Lune was considered delicate, minor, a pretty piano piece rather than a statement. But the people who heard it, they held on to it. Pianists began to perform it independently, outside of the suite. It wasn't the form or complexity that resonated. People remembered how it made them feel. That soft despair, serene glow, the hush after heartbreak. Slowly, Clair de Lune stepped out of the shadows. What started as a quiet piano miniature grew into one of the most beloved pieces of the 20th century, a sound that belongs almost as much to the listener's inner world as to the notes on the page. Clair de Lune may have started life in the salons of Paris, but it didn't stay there. Over the decades, it began to appear in unexpected places. In the 1930s, it was arranged for orchestra by conductor Leopold Stokowski, giving it a sweeping cinematic sound. Soon after, it appeared in early films, its quiet longing perfectly suited to scenes of romance and nostalgia. By the time Hollywood discovered it, there was no turning back. Clair de Lune became a kind of emotional shorthand on screen, the sound of memory, love, and the bittersweet passage of time. It played in films like Ocean's 11, Casino Royale, Twilight, and countless others. Even outside cinema, it became a cultural touchstone. In commercials, in ballet, in television, its opening chords still stop people in their tracks. The piece no longer belonged just to Debussy, or even to pianists. It had become part of the shared emotional language of the modern world. More than a century after its publication, Clair de Lune hasn't faded. It hasn't become a relic, preserved only in dusty sheet music. Part of its magic is that it doesn't belong to a single time or place. It's not about Paris in 1905, or about Debussy's own life, or even about Verlaine's poem. It's about something universal, something anyone, anywhere, can recognize the first time they hear it. It's a sound that feels like memory, not a specific memory, just the feeling of remembering something precious, something you can't quite hold on to. The piece never demands that you understand it. It simply sits beside you, like a companion for whatever you're carrying. That's why it keeps appearing, in films, in weddings, in moments of private reflection. Clair de Lune doesn't tell you what to feel. It gives you space to feel whatever is already there. And in that quiet generosity, it continues to speak to new listeners long after Debussy's own voice has gone silent. Debussy died in 1918, his funeral quiet, overshadowed by the noise of war. But Clair de Lune survived. It slipped past the fashions of its time, past the century that followed. We no longer see the Paris he knew, but we still hear the same Moonlight. Because Clair de Lune isn't just a melody, it's a feeling that lives in the space between memory and longing. And if you listen closely, beyond the harmonies, beyond the quiet and beyond the notes, you might hear something else. The question is, what do you hear? If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and also hit the notification bell so you won't miss future deep dives into the hidden stories behind timeless music like this.